Welcome to Beyond the Collar, everybody. Mary is next to me on the computer on my left, but she may not be on your left, but there she is. She has her video on. And Joshua is here on my, next to me. Joshua is both Mary and I's master, but we have just recently decided, as of yesterday, if you were not here last week, Joshua wasn't 100% sure what we would call him. Would we call him Master Joshua, as Mary and I usually do, or just simply Master? Or would we refer to him as MJ or his name? And you have decided?
Just Joshua. Joshua works. Because it's beyond the collar. It's beyond the power exchange. It's like we're everyday people. And as I slowly strangle my ego in the corner, I think it just makes sense, right? Because I'm coming from my point of view in my relationship with submission too.
I think it makes sense as well, although it will be very strange for an hour.
Consider it role play. I command you to call me by my first name.
Well, now it's easy. Now that it's in order. But yes, so Mary and I started Beyond the Collar a couple of months ago. I think that is this our 5th or 6th month having this Tuesday night call?
I think this is our 6th month. Like, we're officially 6 months.
Wow, look at that. Half a year. Almost there. And recently, as of last week, we had our master join us in our conversations as a way to open up the topics and conversations to D types as well as S types. We want to continue to keep the space free and open and safe for S types to speak and to reflect, but we also want the same for D types. And when I say safe, I mean just a space for processing, not saying that uncomfortable emotions or triggers or turnoffs may arise, but we're here to talk about it, and safe as in it's okay to talk about it and okay to reflect and okay to process here, and we're here for each other and not against one another. So we're going to record the conversation. It is for Mary and I's sake, and so that we can go back and look at the recordings and get a sense of where we came from. Again, it's been 6 months, so.
We're also streaming live on TikTok and Instagram to make it more available for folks who don't have the ability to get on Zoom or have limited access. Yes. The idea is to get this type of conversation and information out there because it's extremely helpful for all types of people to hear. As I've witnessed you to, the validation that you bring in the journey is significant, it's important. So we want to make sure that it's as many people are hearing this. Mm-hmm. With that being said, what we'll do is we'll call to unmute. We still have to unmute, correct? Because we had some bombers come in and a funny thing is they put on pornography, like, do you know who you're joining? But it's nonetheless, it's very disruptive and we want to avoid that. So raise your hands and we'll unmute you and then share. You're more than welcome to share in the comments as well, as I'll be reading comments from the comment section here and both from social media, because again, what you guys share here impacts them as well. And it's really incredible to see what everyone here is doing.
Yes, and if privacy...
Recording in progress.
Yes, thank you, Mary. And if privacy is your concern, your name will not be spoken, your username will not be spoken out loud. Same goes for TikTok and Instagram. And again, if just having your voice heard across other platforms makes you uncomfortable, then yes, please use the chat, and we, again, won't say what your username is or your name whatsoever.
You can also DM us, whatever makes it easier for you to communicate so you feel safe, seen, and heard.
The TikTok is on yours or
it's under Master Joshua Rodriguez, technically. But I believe you can look up Master Joshua and it'll come up on TikTok.
Awesome. So I think housekeeping was the hand raise. If you want to talk, you can just go to the react button on the bottom of your screen and put the little hand up, and we will ask you to unmute. And did I miss anything, Mary, other than introducing what the topic is?
I think the only other thing that I'll share is that we are all perspective based. We talk based off of our life experiences. So while we will be sharing personal things, I ask everyone to kind of just consider that in your own journey and kind of where you're at and how you best connect to what's being shared. I understand that there are some people that join us that are brand new. So I want to make sure that if you are new to this, like, take everything in that everyone is sharing, because everyone's perspective is right. Just kind of lean in there.
Yeah, and all three of us have different times and layers of experiences, so it is truthfully perspective based. I mean, you being an educator, but also having pro-dom experience, you have much more experience and ability to speak on behalf of truth rather than only perspective, if that makes any sense. Educational. I mean,
I just have a bit more information, right, and shared perspectives that I've learned over time. That's the only difference.
Yeah, and I think
we got a question. Oh, sorry. We got a question. If are the other KC TikTok convos, such as play session reflections, going to be on Zoom as well, or platform exclusive? I would say it's really just dependent on what part of the KC events you are attending. Most things are done virtually, but if you're part of like mentorship or things of that nature, those won't be discussed in these platforms. But we try to expand our questions and bring every form or type of question to this main platform to discuss through. But if there's more specific questions, I'm sure we could get you an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Just visit kinkcollective.net, drop us a message, or through any social media platform, and I can get you the info that you'd like.
Awesome.
And if you guys have ideas on what you want us to talk about, you can always drop those too.
Yes, please.
We're always happy to chat. Sorry, Natalie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I just had this realization that we introduced Joshua last week, but he didn't really give an introduction to who he was outside of both of our power exchanges, like where your experience
I am Master Joshua. No, my name is Joshua. I've been in the BDSM lifestyle for a dozen or so years. I've been doing it professionally for just about the same amount of time, hosting events for about a decade. And I came into the lifestyle here in New York City, into the community here in New York City. I've been curious ever since I was young. Sensory was my thing. Nylons was my key to body stimulation. And I was 5, rubbing my aunt's nylons. But then came growing up in the 80s and the 90s, where sex, in order to be a man, you had to have sex. And that was what I grew up with culturally, believing that. And my relationship with sex is very particular. And it's a big part of me, my relationship with intimacy and what was and wasn't present in my life, ultimately leading me to discovering BDSM out of curiosity and wanting to learn and gain more, and then learning about the importance of connection through that process, through the absence of what was present in the city. And that's why I started hosting events, was to create a different type of space where connection mattered, because I started learning the importance of just holding space with someone, and how investing into a connection is what builds the connection. And fast forward, being the reluctant dom for many, many years, and then finally settling in with being considered a master to someone, a leader to someone, it really changed and impacted my life. In the same breath, acknowledging that I didn't get to pursue my submissive side much at all, aside from in intimate and physical settings, because the more I learned about this stuff, the less I would trust people. And so that put a wall up for me. And it's like, do I desire to experience submission? Absolutely. I mean, I've had to dissect for myself my understanding of why does a person want to do that, and then connect with that. And so being able to talk about it and hear what is shared here will allow me to learn different access points of what it means for me and my part of that scale, and how do I get there. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. I thought that, it was an important piece that we missed. Here he is. So the topic today is self-advocating in the lifestyle. So the first question, Mary, are you gonna copy and paste? Awesome. In your own words and perspective, what is self-advocacy? Anyone like to go first? I can if
well, I'll let you go first. You guys go first.
Okay. So when I was thinking about my definition of self-advocacy today, I thought, well, you can't have... Self-advocacy for me is confidently expressing your needs, wants, and desires. But you can't self-advocate for yourself without the introspective uncovering your self piece, or else you're self-advocating for yourself and creating boundaries for yourself that you don't actually need, or you don't actually want, or you don't actually desire. So for me, self-advocation is a process and almost an umbrella term, or like not an umbrella term, but to get there, you have to work through a lot of falsities within yourself, and it's difficult, and I think that in a lot of ways self-advocacy is self-actualization, like the end goal. But advocating for yourself can be just moving forward, can just be taking one step closer to knowing what your needs, wants, and desires are, not even just being able to express it, or to be able to say it confidently, or to be able to say it as quick as it comes to you. That's what my understanding is of it.
Mary?
I would say, if I think about self-advocacy, it's a solo responsibility that you take on to just kind of set the playing fields of interacting with you in general. As I think about both vanilla as well as BDSM, I think it's an articulation of your boundaries. It's the articulation of the desires that you have, life goals, needs, wants, but also setting the ground rules of, hey, if you're going to be in my space, this is what I'm going to need in exchange. And I think that that's where a lot of these real life dynamics come into place, especially when you're interacting outwardly amongst strangers or amongst friends. I think that self-advocacy can tie into negotiation more broadly. That's where a lot of the commonality of what this word is comes up, because we talk about consent and we talk about negotiation, and really just making sure that you're taking every piece of your life and really taking care of yourself, right? But in the same breath, I think that sometimes self-advocacy gets put on others of like, hey, you should have known this about me. And I think that the really big focus is that it's self, right? It's you. You are the ruler of you at the end of the day. So it is your responsibility first and foremost to make sure that you have what you need, and that when you have connections that exceed or step into these boundary lines that you don't want to play in, that you are speaking up again. Because I think too, like Natalie spoke about a very confident person, but I also feel like self-advocacy is tested when you are not confident of what are you going to put into place to be here and to articulate for yourself. So
but I think a vulnerability can also be confident in that sense. And when I say confident, I completely understand what you're saying there. I don't mean like confident in like I know exactly what I need for myself, but confident in the fact that you're communicating it. Like you just communicating it and putting it out there is confident.
1000%. But I think we talked about such a spectrum, right? Because there are people that advocate quietly, and then there are people that advocate and they're the loudest people in the room of like, you're in my space, and there's other things, right?
100%.
I think visually that could look different ways.
100%. And I don't equate loud to confident, and I don't equate soft and a little bit more to oneself not confident either.
Joshua?
No, this is fucking awesome. Because I've been I was speaking about this last week or the week before, around self-advocacy and what does it mean. Kat and I dove into this whole to-do about it, and essentially it's being able to speak up for your needs and your wants and your desires, but well beyond just intimate settings or power exchange. It's like to be visible and to be respected and to understand your value in the space that you're in, right? I'm not to be treated this way, right? This is not acceptable. Also, the better you build out your vocabulary, the better you build your language out, the better you can describe in more precision what it is that you need, right? And something was shared by one of you around, if you don't know what your boundaries are, someone's going to set those boundaries for you, in other words. And it's like, or you set your advocacy needs on other people's expectations of you. And you become passive. No, it's okay. I'll do this. No, it's okay. I'll come later, right? Whatever a person does to avoid the issue, as opposed to actually having the courage to say, listen, I want to, but this is what I need. Or, hey, this is missing. And being able to find the space to have that language exchange.
Yeah, it's like being your own lawyer, slightly.
Yeah, dude. Because at the end of the day, if you don't ask for it, who will? Right? You can't leave it up to someone else. You have to take the chance and say it, because if not, no one's gonna guess it for you. And self-advocacy, self-realization, self-actualization, right? If you speak up, you will get an answer. If you don't speak up, you won't get any answer. You'll get what you're given. And that changes like the whole ballpark of, well, what am I allowed to ask for? And that's a whole self-value thing, like understanding what that means. And that's why this shit is hard.
Yes.
So that's my answer to the question.
Thank you.
No,
Josh.
thank you. Yo, I'm gonna keep it tally.
I'm like sweating.
I'm kidding. No tally.
You can give her my tallies.
Deal.
Oh. Mary.
Joshua.
Next time you're here, watch yourself. So if anybody would like to answer for themselves in the chat or raise their hand, what is self-advocacy to them, feel free. We're going to move forward, but feel free to conjure up whatever that means for you and answer it whenever.
At any time.
Yeah.
So one of the things I remember from last week was I don't advocate for myself in all the scenarios I need to in my life. And, it's Master Joshua, pro dom, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, dude, it's a human being. I'm a human being. And like anyone else, there's times that I do, and there's times that I'm afraid to.
We have someone with their hand raised on Zoom.
Lizzie.
Hey-o. So I pretty much everything that you guys have said, except for me, so what I wrote was, for me, it's understanding my boundaries, communicating with them, and then sticking with it. That is the thing that I struggle the most with, is following through. Also, I rely upon a support network that I create for them to call me out on my shit when I'm not doing that thing. Well, it is definitely self-advocacy to be responsible for oneself. I feel like I put checks and balances in place, my friends, my family around me, to make sure that, like, no, you did that wrong, and you should probably admit you did that wrong, because then that reinforces my self-advocacy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when we get into the next question about how do we advocate for ourselves within our vanilla lives, within our familial relationships, relationships outside of kink, professional relationships, that's also something that, like, within my friends, I completely, for me, I advocate for myself by making sure that I'm advocating for them. If I see that they're in the shit and they could easily, and I've seen them switch their perspective so that they can get out of the shit, but they're staying there because they're comfortable there, or they're doing something for some reason, mostly for being comfortable, and I see that they're there for way too long, I have no problem getting in the shit with them, as long as they're like just like able to get themselves out. And if I know that they've been able to do it before, that's where it's like the pressure, you have to do it. Like, you have to do it. Like, I've completely ended relationships with people because they've stayed in their problem zone for too long, and they don't need to be. And I've seen them out of it before. So what are you doing? So that's a big part of self-advocacy for me as well, is like advocating for my relationships, my people. Like, I see you can do it, so what's going on? So I'm with you.
There's a comment that says, I would say having a deep knowing and using discernment of what is a solid yes and solid no for me is self-advocacy.
Someone also said...
Speaking up for your needs. If you're unable to know what you need, then how can someone else know? How will my dom know what I need if I am unable to express it?
Starting a conversation is self-advocating. Not knowing exactly what you need and having a conversation about what you may need is self-advocating. You don't need to know exactly what you need to have a conversation. You just need to have a conversation and be willing to have a conversation.
So the overall question that we have is, how do you advocate for yourself in your vanilla life, work, familial relationships, non-kinky friends, etc., and what makes it difficult?
Rejection makes it difficult for me. The fear of rejection. The fear of being told no. The fear I'm asking for too much. The fear that I'm not worth what I'm asking for. Those would be reasons why I haven't.
How about you, Natalie?
What makes it difficult? How do I advocate for myself? I guess what made it difficult specifically within my relationships with family members, extended family members mostly, was that I didn't want to cause trouble for my father. I didn't want to cause trouble for my parents. I didn't want to advocate for myself to the point where they would receive backlash from other family members. So for me, it was a lot of silence, a lot of not speaking up, or not, like, feeling like it was a better option to say nothing than to say anything that would cause any distress on their front. Nowadays, I advocate for myself within situations in my family where condescending comments are made towards me by not being condescending back, just kind of killing with kindness. So how is your life as a dancer? How's that dance degree going? Oh, it's going fantastic. How's your life? It's going great. How's, not being condescending back, just being like, it's going, very simple, quiet, to the point. Not quiet, simple, to the point, and then just allowing myself to be how I am until something else comes up where it becomes condescending, and then I don't engage with it. I just finish it or ask another question to get them to process their own, why are you asking me this question condescendingly? So it's a bit more of I figured that's the best way to do it on the front of not causing too much distress to my parents within that family role. But what makes it difficult is that I don't want to make it difficult on them.
I think when I think about advocation for myself in my vanilla life, I didn't, due to like not wanting to take up space. I didn't like being looked at. Like I didn't want to be like the front runner until I realized I was the front runner, and kind of stepped into that for myself. And I think I did that a lot in work, and working up as fast as I did. And that's not like as like a, oh, look it, but like it was to say to myself, I can do it. And here I am doing it. And now when I open up my mouth, now people are listening to say like, well, now let me go ask Mary before I go do something else. Which is affirming in itself of continue to break what I would say the generational curse, right? I think in my life, my family, especially like my mom, didn't speak up for herself. And so I think a lot of what I witnessed was what I lived until I said to myself, I can end up the same way, right? Like I never wanted to regret anything, right? Like I don't want to not say something and then I miss an opportunity. But I think what makes it difficult, I think rejection was said, but being abandoned. I have really strong abandonment issues. And also I've asked and it's not been given. And so it's like when you ask and things have consistently proven out that like it's not being done, like it's not being recognized or discussed, it's almost like, well, then I'm not going to keep showing up like this. And then I think that kind of comes down to what I was sharing earlier, is that you reevaluate, like, is this the connection, right? Like, is it a connection thing? Is it an advocacy, right? Like, I think there's a lot of different players and layers to, like, what advocacy can do. And then I think that overall, you are the one that pushes it. So you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable to advocate for yourself in most regards. And I think the biggest thing, and I'm sure a lot of us can, or most of us can kind of connect to this, is vanilla-wise, when you're coming out that you're into BDSM, you're wearing collars in public, you're wearing latex, or you're going to get seen on a train or something, like, there is always that if, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also to say to myself, well, what if somebody showed up? Like, how am I gonna show up, right? Like, if someone says hi to me, am I gonna shy away, or am I gonna say hi? Like, yeah. It's just prepping yourself for those things that can occur.
Yeah, and it's not one equation. Like, it's very, like, self-advocation is very circumstantial. And there's lots of pieces that you have to consider in order to make a decision on what's the best way to advocate for yourself. It's before I had this collar, I had this huge leather collar with 3 rings, and there were a couple of times where I would go see my extended family and my father would ask me to take it off. And I had to go through this, well, but wearing my collar is advocating for my life and advocating for myself. But where does the danger lie in me taking it off for myself morally? Or where does the danger lie in me wearing something where it's not seen? Or where does the danger lie in me wearing it and my family seeing it and then saying something to my father? Or just doing whatever the possible options are.
Right.
It's like a lot of pieces.
There's a couple comments. Standing up to say something came after I stopped people pleasing. I think you need to stand on what you believe, even if no one believes. Fear is a big factor when you can't advocate for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. It's funny, like, as we talk about that experience, I remember meeting up with my dad after years, and I had bruises all over my body because I had a rough PlayStation the night before. And, like, he looked, but it was like, I'm not going to ask. Like, I don't want to know. Like, but showing up as open as it is was fun. Lizzie.
So how I advocate in my vanilla relationships varies depending on the relationship. Ultimately, I think it comes down to if I feel the person is willing to communicate back with me in a healthy and productive manner. And if they're not, I generally just cut ties or reduce interactions as much as possible. One thing that I was told by my therapist, like, it doesn't matter how much you want to communicate in a healthy and productive manner. If that other person isn't willing to do, and it's such a simple concept, if the other person isn't willing to do that back with you, the communication isn't going to happen. It's not a one-sided thing. but I find that confrontation is probably the most difficult thing for me in self-advocacy. It's not easy for me to ascertain if the conflict, both internal and external, are worth it. It takes a lot more spoons or effort from me to deduce if I should be self-advocating or walking away. That's something I'm still learning how to do.
I can relate to that. Is the conflict worth it? Is me advocating for myself in this situation with this person, is that conflict worth it? I totally agree with that. Priorities. Yeah.
It is balancing my authenticity and like who I am.
Yeah.
More important than pleasing someone to like bend down to what they think I should be, right? Like I think that there's a level to that as well.
Yeah. How much energy am I putting out? How much am I receiving? It's like you have to balance. You have to gauge that, I think.
For sure.
Lizzie, thank you for the confrontation statement. It gave me more to add to not just rejection, but also confrontation.
So the next question is, how do you advocate for yourself as the S-type or D-type within your dynamic? What makes self-advocacy in DS difficult?
I think for me, it's about falling short, asking for something that seems out of line, asking for something that may seem too much. It's asking for something that I don't want to say it isn't valued, because that's not the word, but along those lines as the dominant, and the ability to advocate for myself as a submissive during play is one thing, right? But in a power exchange experience, I don't have the language around that.
I think for me, advocating for myself, especially in the beginning, the difficulty was wrapping my head around what slavery meant for me and what submission meant for me, and not necessarily, like, there is the piece of asking for too much that I consider, or asking for too much consideration or exception. But that for me lies more not in the power exchange, but more in terms of polyamory. Asking too much. But in the power exchange, self-advocating, what makes self-advocation difficult is the question for me. Like, for me, it's the difficulty is saying, I can't do this, or this is too much for me right now. And I know that if I said that, a conversation would be had, and we would actually be able to shave down why it's too much, and if it's too much for. So that's the thing. Like, why am I putting this boundary up? Is it because it's actually hitting a moral or a part of my belief system that is truthfully and authentically mine, or is it because of some other reason or some other boundary that I created by myself, just through life, or from society, or from my parents, or shame or guilt, and for me it's the difficulty of having to kill my ego a bit. Because it's like, okay, this seems like it's too much for me, but what if I shifted my perspective and looked at it through this way? Well, I could do that, but this emotion is way too overwhelming and I can't deal with it, so why don't I just say that so we can have a conversation? It's a bit of an overthinking problem. And a bit of a I have very high expectations for myself to be able to perform at a certain capacity. So it's not only just an overthinking, but it's also like that high expectation and the ability to be able to have like the gift of being able to see so many choices and being able to see and put myself in all of them and just try to choose the one that ends with the best scenario, whatever that means.
Mary?
I think that it all kind of boils down again to kind of what we were sharing earlier. I think you advocate through negotiation. I also think you exchange when the responsibility needs to be on one another, right? Like I think about aftercare, right? Like sometimes when you go into an aftercare space, you can't advocate for yourself. I don't know what I want. I just know that like I need you to hear me or I need you to listen. And I think that sometimes that's where that responsibility kind of gets blurred, right? Because as you focus on DS or MS, you focus on the responsibility you have to one another to make sure both of you are okay. And like both of you are kind of resetting or coming back to that place, right? I think that that's kind of where some of those lines get blurred. But in the same breath, I think you advocate for yourself in an MS or DS by ensuring you're taking up the space that's been granted to you, right? I think that that's one of the biggest ways you advocate. And then you talk through polyamory, you talk through monogamy, you talk through what is this exchange of power that we're going to go through, right? In the same breath of what am I willing to surrender? What am I willing to kind of give and guide? And where am I looking to be the teacher and be the D-type and kind of step up? We often make the joke, like, I'm a banker. Like, obviously in our exchange, like, no one's going to do the finance. I got the finances, right? But I think where it becomes difficult is navigating the needs and wants, like you were sharing, Natalie. Like, it's overthinking of, like, well, they must clearly want X. So, like, you do all the thinking for all the people and all the things. And it's really exhausting and tiring. But I think that the more that you're able to advocate and withdraw the need to have to control certain things, it makes advocating a bit easier. But I think that the DS difficulties are the same as kind of what we identified earlier in vanilla relationships. I think there's just another layer of ownership or belonging. And I think that some people can compare that to like a marriage, right? And to them, that's vanilla and have those same relationship exchanges that are difficult, just like a power exchange can as well.
Which leads us into next week's topic of discussing ownership.
There you go. See? It's like I knew. I know we had a hand up. Did you want to raise your hand again if you wanted to share?
I think it's dropped there. What are actions of self-advocacy, and what are some things you find don't work?
I think
introspection is a big part of that. Mm-hmm. Learning what you believe to be true, self-value, self-reflection, self-awareness is big. Understanding what you don't like is a great place to start. Trying to find what you do like right off the bat is very difficult, or what you are comfortable with is very difficult for a lot of people, because it's like, well, what am I comparing it to? It's easier to start with the shit you don't like or you don't want present in your life. And then as you define that and as that thins out, then you definitely have more points of reference for what you do want.
Yeah, I think a big piece for me is just asking questions. And like I said in the beginning, asking for validation of reality or what is happening, especially if you're in heavy emotions and deep emotions and you're not able to fully see the truth of reality. I think for me, that's totally valid. And it's important, again, introspection, to unwind that process of overthinking and sitting in heavy emotions, and it's totally fine. I think, like I said, asking questions, but also knowing when to ask questions is important. Again, I think that you can always ask a question, but I do think that there are better times to ask questions, and I think that that's also a self-awareness piece. So something that doesn't work for me is asking questions at the wrong time.
I would say something that doesn't work is like trying to fit two puzzle pieces that, you know, are just not going to fit. Like, if it doesn't go, it doesn't go. Like, and that's okay. But being content with not everything is going to roll the way that you plan. But just preparing for, like, when things start to go off course, like, here's how we're going to handle it. And advocacy is, here's how I have to be cared for, versus, like, here's what is going to happen, right? I think that it's a big piece is just conversating. At the end of the day, everybody's human, right? Like, that's the biggest thing the Kink Collective talks about. We're all people, right? And it's just navigating the good versus the bad, and then accepting and respecting, like, where things can't be stepped on and where things have to be nurtured and given the time to. And I think that kind of goes across all sorts of things. But as we focus on advocacy, I think that's how you assert time, and you assert what are the needs, because different people come with a different set of chapters that you all have to learn. And I think that when you touch on introspection and you're constantly changing, like you're constantly evolving, you have to continuously advocate. Hey, I used to be okay with X, now I'm not. Like, and now it doesn't serve me. Or, hey, I said that I didn't mind, like, or I said I don't need this, but turns out, like, I'm good. Like, I've found, like, I actually don't. And, like, come back to the same conversations. That's why we talk about negotiating all the time. Because your body is changing. You get older on your birthday. I hate to tell you that, but, like, everything will move. So you have to move with yourself. Because once you stop, your body's not. Like, you're still going. So mentally challenging yourself to continuously advocate remains important.
Yes, reevaluating and checking in with yourself is a big part of self-advocating. Oh, someone said something.
I can't get the little mousey thing. Oh, there you go. Oh, look at that.
Look at this. Someone said, as someone with severe depression, my sense of self-efficacy, which empowers me to be able to advocate for myself, ebbs and flows. There are times when my self-worth or mental energy is merely too low to truly care about my own advocacy or, unfortunately, enforcing my own standards. In vanilla life, I find certain systems in place. Even those that are meant to be resources to help you are needlessly convoluted to the point of exhaustion and discouragement to keep advocating for yourself. For example, in the workplace, the power structures at play can dissuade me over time to keep fighting for myself. In DS, there is underlying respect. Out in the world, that often has to be demanded. It can be very disheartening, especially for me as a young adult, when self-advocacy is an ongoing practice.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a really powerful share. I'm sitting with, like, the amount of nurturing that you should return to yourself as you self-advocate, right? Because we continuously talk about making sure that you're not as hard on you as you continue to ask for what you need, because that's an easy place to get to. But also leaning in is super important. So that's incredible of the journey that you've not only been on, but you continuously go on.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's a good question. How do we retrieve ourselves when self-advocacy becomes too much, or we've had to communicate so many times and we feel disheartened by having to change, or to have that almost like imposter syndrome like feeling of, what do I really want? Why do my needs and wants and desires keep changing? And it's very frustrating. How do we retrieve ourselves?
Something that comes to mind is, why am I here? Right? If there's a level of advocacy that's needed, either to be seen or respected, it's like, why am I here? Now, I understand that's a big, broad brush statement, because in some cases we're talking about medical scenarios or legal things, and those systems that are in place that are not built to make things easier, right? They're meant to function, but not necessarily function easy. But then you have the other types of spaces where you're asking for what you need and it's not being presented. And that's a different level of self-empowerment too, because you're not pushing up against a system. You're telling someone, you're giving someone an opportunity to create the space or not. And that's a realization, that's a sign. It's like, am I going to put this energy here or not?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear the church singers by any chance?
No.
Okay, because
we're slightly concerned. I was like trying to mute us.
Yeah, no, you're good.
They're
pretty
going
loud.
at it.
They're pretty loud.
They can on TikTok.
Is self-advocacy in DS relationships different from MS relationships?
For myself, I don't think so. Speak up, like tell me, talk to me, because it's a unit. It's not I'm the commander and you're the slave, and it's like it's not a hard fist for me at all. Like I need navigators. I need to be guided through you, the individual. So it's like, help me help you. Now, there's a difference between self-advocacy and then self-fulfilling prophecies, right? When you set yourself up to continuously do the same thing and you're not grasping the guidance, but that's a whole self-value, self-esteem thing, right? And I'd have to self-advocate for myself in that situation if the person wasn't taking care of themselves. Because it's like, I'm not responsible for driving this ship if you're not willing to work with me. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of that slash, I would perform the same. It's like, and expect the same.
I have nothing to add to that. Mary?
Ditto. That was a really solid share, but I agree. I don't think there's any difference. I think that while you may hear that we define them differently, I think it all has the same foundation that it's built off of.
Oh, no,
Are you done scratching really loudly?
The pen wasn't working. I was trying to write a note. Now, with that being said, ritualistically, ceremoniously, it may look different for different power exchanges. For example, the way we do it is very particular to us. They are not submissive people. They are submissive to me, right? It's like they're dominant people. So how I expect them to engage with me is very different. Now, in some power exchanges, there are MS dynamics where the person there's a formal process to asking to remove the collar and sit as two equals, and people do that too. So there's a range of approaches in which people can attach ceremony and ritual to these levels of communication because of the headspaces that they encompass for extended periods of time.
Yeah, I'm just laughing to myself a bit because we can ask you to remove our collar except when we're going through security at the airport.
Yeah, don't cut me hands me for that. Nope, keep that shit on.
And there was an example.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah, no, listen, I was about to standing by your beliefs, man. I had to be there to check that shit.
And that's when you have to consider, is the conflict worth it? Is not getting on this plane?
And they don't go off in the metal detector,
No, they
so
don't.
even better.
It's pretty funny though.
So as we round out the time, the last question is, what change needs to occur within your dynamic in order for self-advocacy to become easier and or normalized?
Courage. I need more courage. I need to be brave. I need to not fear. I need to overcome my fear. Fear is okay too, but I need to overcome that shit too, right? So it's like, I need to be kicked in the balls sometimes to get motivated because of how I've lost opportunities in life because I haven't self-advocated. Right? So it's like, simple there. I need to communicate better.
I think for me, it's the piece of overthinking, and it's the piece of trying to find, again, like how I said before, like it's trying to choose the choice that is going to give me the best overall outcome of a situation. And for me, I think what I need to do is put my ego on the mantle for a second and have a conversation and communicate all of what is happening in my head when the opportunity is available, but not waiting too long either. But also knowing when is the right time to have the conversation, because sometimes there are other people involved, and the time of me actually needing to ask or have a conversation is not the right time. But it's having it the next time that is like as soon as I can, to be able to get out of that overthinking, assumption creating headspace.
I would say for me, the biggest thing is just talking in the moment, just because it's a collective of what you both shared. But really, too, also removing the harsh expectations of what is really my responsibility to manage and navigate too. And finding that balance of what that looks like overall. But there are some comments here. It says, I need to feel safe enough to say, I need to feel safe enough to say what I mean. Absolutely. You see, fear is what holds most of us back, vanilla and kink. Agreed. I need to figure out how to speak his language. Fair.
That's
Fair.
a big piece.
Need more communication and be less shy of my wants, needs, and desires. And egos are bad. Money doesn't change people. It just brings the person out.
But a lot of incredible shares this evening. I know we thank you all for your continuous vulnerability as we kind of all process live together. I'll turn it over to you both to round us out.
Yeah. Ditto. Thank you, everybody. It's always incredible to have these conversations each and every Tuesday at 7:30. Next week we'll be here as well. We're gonna be discussing ownership and what ownership is within MS and DS. And what else is happening at the Kink Collective?
Through our experience.
Yes, through our experience. Yes. Sorry.
Let's see. Next Tuesday. You know, every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Kat and I jump on for Kinky Conversations. And the idea is to have discussions around questions that are relevant to our journey in self-awareness, in self-value, in who we are coming to the table, in vulnerability, in power exchange. Because, like I say, people die doing this stuff. And I don't say it to sound joking, like I'm joking about it. It's that it's a harsh reality, is that this stuff is very serious and people do get hurt and harmed. And it's like understanding the significance of knowing the person and their word in front of you if you're going to take that leap, because these relationships are very impactful and very eye-opening and very bonding, and they can hurt you just as well as they can heal you, right? So it's like understanding who you are within this range is the whole point of all of these conversations, is to have these candid conversations so other people can join in and share your perspectives, because someone in here needs to hear your side of the story too, your version.
And as always, we don't process alone. Our community is always continuously building. Hearts are what we drop in our chat every time to let you all know that we're all here for one another. And of course, speaking from the three of us, if you ever need anything at all, any questions arise, or you have feelings that you want to process through, you can contact us through the Kink Collective, or find us on FetLife or Instagram as well. But I think that's everything.
What's next week?
Discussing ownership.
Oh, that's right, discussing. So a little bit about me. I also have
a lot of happening.
Yeah, a lot of happenings. Thank you.
Yes, we're gonna be here for like a couple of minutes. So if you want to stay and ask questions.
Please ask away.
Recording stopped.
I'll also go ahead and allow you guys to unmute yourself now that we're off. So feel free. You have questions.
Oh, okay, she just left. I was going to say we haven't worked on the Discord yet. Any time to even put into how we could do it. But hopefully maybe by October we get time to look into that.
Ion, I respect the apple. That's cool.
I was asking out there was Mod, but no, Kushla, thank you for the support. Also on TikTok and Instagram, please feel free to drop any questions. Thank you guys for the constant support on both media streams. Big Daddy, what's up? Shoot away. What's your question?
So with self-advocacy, part of my question was it shouldn't be a battle. And I feel like whenever I have to advocate for myself somewhere, it ends up being a battle. And that just doesn't sound healthy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my question came from. But I do thank you guys all for taking it seriously and asking the question itself too. I wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, that's a very solid point. It's like sometimes it's not just as simple as asking a question, but it's like demanding attention.
But there's a time and place, like Natalie said, to ask those questions. I'm horrible sometimes at that.
No, there is, and then there's a time and place where you have to say it.
It's circumstantial.
Right, it's not just a, wait a second, but sometimes it's showing up and saying it too. It's not just about digressing, but sometimes this is where the line stops.
Yeah.
And sometimes a minute's not an hour or 3 days.
But
you can give someone time, a moment to breathe is what I think I'm saying here. Is to give that person a moment to breathe, but yeah, you need that attention.
Yes.
It depends on the person, it depends on the relationship, and when I say that there's a time and a place to ask a question, I mostly mean within my dynamic, because I see what's going on so often and I'm around so often that I know that this is not the right time, but I know that there will be another time soon where I can do it and I can wait. In other relationships, sometimes it's like, no, like today is the day we have to talk about it, and sometimes there's not even that that thought before I go into it, or that time before I'm like, today's the day that we're talking about it. Sometimes we're in the middle of the conversation, present moment, and it has to happen now.
Right now.
And it's not a matter of me thinking about, oh, is this the right time to ask it? It doesn't matter. But it's circumstantial. It depends on the person, the time, what's going on. Like there's not like I said before, there's no math. There's not one single math equation for every single self-advocacy.
But don't wait for the perfect time.
Right.
Because there's like the perfect time. There'll never be a perfect time if...
the best time, within the spectrum.
Yeah. Because waiting for the perfect time too, it stalls it.
Yeah, and I think it's all about the return back to the conversation. What are you coming back with? Are you coming back with hurt feelings, or are you coming back with like a plan? Right, like, because I think that's a bigger thing too. Like, am I calling you out on some things like that we need to talk through, and like we're gonna have that type of conversation? I think that the mindfulness with the approach back into it, after you allowed time to pass, coming back in with the right intentions and the right mind help guide those conversations well oiled versus a bit more scattered, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also remaining flexible. Because sometimes you go in self-advocating for yourself, and there was a piece of information that you didn't know. And it's allowing yourself to be flexible to that piece of information you didn't know that might change your whole reason for advocating for yourself.
So, yes, there's that.
It's just always deep. I thank you guys for letting me be here. Baby girl really does sit and listen to this. This Zoom here too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So there doesn't seem to be any other questions.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening.
Yes, we'll see you next week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time.
Have a great night, guys.
Important piece.
Good night.
Good night.
Good day, depending where you're joining us from.